Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwoche. Technology is believed to be the next big thing for Africa, except for those who find it difficult to send a text message on their phone or follow the instructions on an automated teller machine. And no thanks to illiteracy. According to statistics, 1 in 3 adults cannot read in Africa, where more than 170 million adults are illiterate, out of which 47 million are aged 15 to 24. In a bid to raise awareness and highlight the concerns of literacy around the world, September the 8th of every year is International Literacy Day. What are your thoughts on literacy in Africa as a tool for sustainable development? You can share with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. We'll take a report now, and Africa Today will continue. Thanks for joining us.
Nigeria now holds the world record in the highest number of its young out of school. This is according to a new UNICEF report. It is estimated that about 10.5 million of these children may never have the chance to live out their dreams, and education experts fear that this could mar the country's quest for development. Adamu Ali is 20 years old and has never seen the four walls of a classroom. He traveled miles from his hometown of Kano to this suburban area in Nigeria's capital, and his quest for survival has been his motivation. His childhood dream of being a medical doctor was cut short because he had no formal education.
I
was rearing cattle before I came to Abuja. I did all this to provide for my family because I am the only child of my mother. Hence, I could not go to school.
Adamo is among the 10 million Nigerian children who are not in school and may never live out their dreams. A situation that has left tears in the eyes of this aged woman. She sits here all day begging for alms. She says life would have been better if she had gone to school. She's now worried about the future of her children. Investment in basic education by government is not enough, and school enrollment rate is still very low in the northern part of the country. George Igelegbai is a UNICEF education specialist. Education for him is beyond the ability to read and write. He believes the Nigerian child must be equipped to contribute to the nation's development.
Education is not just only a sustainer of development. It's an energizer. It's an initiator of development. It is when you have education that development begins to have meaning. You begin to have proper focus, proper planning, proper result determination, proper attribution of resources in a direct way, enhancement of effectiveness and efficiency, and getting quality results.
Education is one of the key elements needed to promote sustainable development in any society. And this expert is of the view that government must invest in the primary school system if it's serious in achieving its Vision 2020. Amina Hamid, Africa Today.
For over 40 years now, the United Nations has been celebrating International Literacy Day, reminding everyone that literacy is a human right and the foundation of all learning. The theme for this year is literacy and sustainable development. Now, joining us on Africa Today, we have Adibi Olubukola of the Jekin NGO in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to Africa Today.
Thank you very much.
Right. And then on Skype is Nancy Josie Chiakudia, a lawyer and co-founder of H2O Congo. She is based in the UK.
Hi, how are you?
All right, Nancy, you're welcome to Africa Today. Let me start with you. From Congo to many countries you have traveled and been to, worked and schooled, as the case may be. Now, back home in Africa, so many people see literacy as the qualifier based on Western education. But in your own mind and from your experience and what you have known and your assessment, what is literacy in true terms?
Well, literacy is short as the ability to read and write. The United Nations actually defines literacy as the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. So it's a very broad definition. Now, to be able to read and write, it forms part of our daily activities. It is a human right. And unfortunately, so many people are stripped from their right to read and write due to war, due to poverty, and other issues, and also injustice. A world that is not literate is also a world that is full of injustice. That's how I see it.
All right, now, if we have to make comparisons, certainly Africa is not the only continent having issues of war, having the issues of violence and so on, but Africa is one of those countries that has a high level of illiteracy. So can we blame war and crisis for the level of illiteracy on the continent?
I definitely think that it is interlinked. I believe that if there's no peace in a country, it will be difficult to achieve the goal of reaching literacy around all of Africa. And I believe that governments play a big role in achieving this. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the war in Africa, because, for example, if we look at England recently, there was a report about 24 European countries in Europe, and England came 22nd in literacy, and yet England has schools such as Oxford University, Cambridge, but still they came 22nd. So there's also a willpower there. We have to put in and implement systems in which we do all that we can to empower our youth and empower our children, empower our men and women to learn how to read and write, because it forms part of society. You cannot search for a job, for example, if you cannot read or write, or you cannot have a job if you cannot read or write. So it is very important that we encourage our governments to really fight for a literate Africa.
All right, now, for decades now, countries of Africa have been earmarking monies from their budgets to try to raise the standard of education on the continent generally. But how would you rate how would you assess all this investments, all of this effort towards raising the literacy level on the continent?
Well, I think it's about putting the money where it's right. Is the money going where it's supposed to be going? If we look at employment, for example, in Africa, does it measure with the money that is poured into making sure that our youth have work, making sure that our youth can read? It was mentioned that about 10.5 million individuals in Nigeria, if I understood correctly, will not get that basic education that they deserve. And also mentioned that a 20-year-old never has seen a classroom before. And that's not right in 2014. We need to work a lot harder to achieve the millennium, the goal of doubling literacy around the world. The only countries that are able to do this, they say, is China, I believe, Iran, and Indonesia, I believe, are the three countries that they believe will be able to achieve the goal of increasing illiteracy around the world. And that's very serious, that Africa is not even mentioned. Any African country is mentioned in that list.
All right, Nancy, we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Ayaebene, you have worked with people in the grassroots. You have traveled far and wide within Nigeria and even beyond, as the case may be. You've met people who are supposed to be in school, who are not in school, who are supposed to know basic reading and writing, who don't know, as the case may be. But how widespread is this?
I think it's really bad. That's what I would say. I think the gap is really, really wide. We have a long way to go. I remember that I think some years ago, I gave a young boy, I think he's about 17 years old. Okay. I gave him a ride in my car, and I asked him to use a seatbelt, and I discovered he's never used a seatbelt before in his life. Wow. And that's a 17-year-old boy, in the next few months becomes an adult. And I believe that literacy is supposed to help us, to improve exposure. We have people the gap between the urban and rural is so wide that even the people in the rural area, I think they don't even know the essence of education yet. They seem to see education as like a bondage, like you're forcing them, to want to even get educated because, the things that are supposed to encourage them to want to be educated is missing in the system. So you seem not to want to be, I don't have food in my stomach and you want me to go to school. It's not my priority at that period. I don't have a roof over my head and you want me to go to school. That is not my priority. So this gap is really getting, it's getting the case more severe. So I think when we begin to look into those issues that is making most people not even want to get educated, I think we'll most likely be closing the gap.
Okay, let me ask this question I asked Nancy earlier on as well. When you talk about education, the first thing that comes to mind to people is the issue of Western type of education. Now, what's the relationship between being literate and being educated?
Well, the relationship is just like a foundation and a wall of a building. Okay. Without the foundation, you can't have a wall. The wall is going to come down, right? That is the relationship between literacy and education. Okay. I feel that literacy is wider than education, right? But education rides on literacy. So they are like, interwoven somehow. They can't do without each other. Literacy, there are different forms of literacy. It's not only just reading and writing. And that was why I used the word exposure some minutes ago, because it's also some form of literacy. You can have people learn even from things around them, right? They are exposed to different forms of literacy. Now you can have people learn even by using a computer. You can use print. Yeah, you can use just visual learning, for people. There's so many things that you can use to expose yourself. So I think it's more about exposure. Literacy is much more about exposure. Okay. And then it goes deeper, but education helps you to gain more knowledge, right? And it makes it a lot deeper in you.
All right. I know Nancy mentioned the issue of crisis and war on the continent. That is one of the reasons responsible for illiteracy on the continent. But we know that it is not in all African countries you have war or violence or insurgency, as the case may be. But the issue of illiteracy runs across the entire length and breadth of the continent. So what other factors are responsible for this trend?
Well, as I said earlier, I personally think, based on my own experience in the NGO sector, working with the grassroots people, I think one of the key things is poverty. Another one is still the culture. Our culture is who we are, right? Religion is another aspect. There's so many things that we've built our lives around that has made us see, education as not really a priority for us. And as I said earlier, I don't have a roof over my head. I don't have food in my tummy. You're asking me to go to school. So you now have parents out there, you could have a widow with maybe like 3-4 children, and she has maybe a daughter of about 16 or 15 years old, and and you're expecting her to send the 3 children to school when she can't actually afford, the basic needs that the child requires to survive. She would rather send the daughter to a place, she'd rather put, a tray on the child's head to sell so that the family can eat. But she's not seeing education as, building a foundation for the child that the child can ride on in the future. She's not going to live forever. And if she really wants a better life for her daughter, education is something that she's just has to invest into. She just has to have a way of planning, that 24 hours, even for the girl, in such a way that even if the girl has to support the family, education should also be a priority in the household for both the male and the female children.
Okay. I like when you talk about the male and female. We'll come back to this because it's very vital.
Yeah.
Now, statistics show that 95% of the world's uneducated people live in developing countries, and about 70% are women. And as the world celebrates with about 4 billion literate people on the planet, do you think Africa should join the party of celebration? We'll go on a quick break, and Africa Today will continue. Thanks for staying with us. right, Africa began making rapid strides towards universal primary education in 2000. But a few years down the line, many say out-of-school children remain a source of concern. Now we still have Nancy joining us on Skype. Nancy, when we make comparison between the girl child and the boy child, as the case may be, it seems the ladies or the girls are a little more disadvantaged when it comes to the level of literacy. Statistics have shown. Why do we have this trend?
A cultural trend, as was mentioned earlier, that if there's a boy and a girl in a family, it's more likely that the boy will be sent to school and the girl will stay home. Now, 76 million illiterate young women in the world, and in these 76 million women are found in 9 countries alone in the world, and these countries include Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Other countries are Burkina Faso, Egypt, Tanzania, Pakistan, India, Ethiopia, Bangladesh. And if you think about it, 5 of these 9 countries are in Africa. Now, does this tell us that there's an issue about the role between women and men in Africa? That's an issue that needs to be raised. But I think it's important to remember that Africa is growing and developing. Like today, we have 3 female presidents, educated, strong female presidents in the African continent. And we need to encourage our young children, our young girls, to know that one day they too can become President Sirleaf Johnson or Dr. Zuma of the African Union, that there is hope still, and that we will achieve the goal of sending more girls to school.
All right, from your assessment, what can be done to improve the level of literacy in Africa?
Well, there's different factors that we have to look at. There's social factors, economic factors, and just the environment as a whole that we need to look at. Like if we look socially, we need to work in schools. Education is the key. Education is the key to freedom, to this, because with education you can get work, you can take fully part in society, economically. Also getting people to work and learning. When you have education, you can also be able to work. You can get the high positions in society. So I think definitely that education is a factor that we need to work on. And personally, at H2O Congo in the Congo, we've started working with young mothers between the age of 12 to 22, helping them gain this free education so that they also can take part of society.
All right, Nancy, thank you very much for talking to Africa Today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Now, let's take it from Jackie Nenjil, your group and your organization. Today, you were very involved with activities around trying to let people... Can you tell us more about your activity today?
Okay, yes. We have a project called Dress a Child for School project.
Okay.
And it was initiated to commemorate the International Literacy Day. We noticed that quite a lot of people don't even notice that there is a day that has been set aside, you know, just to celebrate literacy. And in our organization, we work with vulnerable groups, children, women, and we have a kids club for orphans and vulnerable children. We have over 400 of them that meet every month. And we found that even though we support their mothers, trying to get them economically empowered, support with other basic needs, you know, it's a bit difficult. You know, you have a widow with 6 children. How is she going to get the children ready for the new academic session that starts every September? And we're like, okay, we can put together this program once a year, not only just to give the children, you know, the necessary items, but also to enlighten their caregivers on the essence of education. And so we bring together necessary stakeholders, we bring together the children that are going to benefit from the event, we bring their caregivers, we bring various stakeholders, you know, in the education sector and even in the community. And then we use different forms, you know, of activities to educate them. Like today we had a playlet that centered on girl education. We had the children have like newscasting. where you had the news in Yoruba, English, and even Pidgin.
Wow.
We had a fashion parade. You know, we had the children read child protection recitations and, you know, different things. But at the end of the day, we had educated them. And we now got the chairperson of SUBEB, Mrs. Daudu. She was the guest speaker. She spoke on the theme of the event, which was also in line with the global theme, but ours was literacy.
SUBEB is universal basic education?
Yes, State Universal Basic Education. And then she was on ground to speak on the theme of the event, which was literacy and sustainable development. And we had guest artists on ground. We had Monique was on ground. We had Firstborn. And, you know, we had a group of dancers, young dancers from Ibadan, you know, explicit dance group. And they were also children that had come from a humble background, but they've been able to come out, you know, to develop their skill in dancing. So it was like a literacy carnival, or literacy Christmas. And at the end of it, 500 children that were already shortlisted from 10 local governments in Lagos State went home with 2 brand new uniforms, a school bag, a pair of sandals, 2 pairs of socks, a dozen exercise books, math sets for secondary school only, and then we had stationery pack containing all necessary stationaries. You know, these children have been reformed. You know, it's like we've prepared them to start the school session. Exactly. So that's the beauty of it.
All right. Now, you mentioned children and women as a vulnerable group. When you say vulnerable group, what makes them vulnerable?
Well, we both know that, let me use a practical example. If there is war right now, the people that have suffered the most will be the women. Okay. So let me say females, because we have the issue of gender, because gender is simply the societal ascribed role of a male or female. They seem to be the ones that physically are also, you know, most necessarily, physically they'll suffer because they really won't be able to fight, you know. And then if you don't have any man around to protect them, they're likely going to suffer more of abuse, sexual abuse, physical harassment. And then you have the kids. The kids, they depend on the adults, at least till they clock like 18 years old, to have, you know, a sense of direction. It's their right to be protected. And then it's their right also to be educated. We are supposed to take responsibility as adults to guide them in the path that they should go, so that by the time they get to a particular stage, they can make the right decisions. So you have all of these people leaning on maybe the adults, you have the females leaning also on the male, because most times you find most families don't want to send the females to school because they say she's going to end up in the kitchen. And she's still going to end up saying submissive to a man. So they just feel that educating the man makes more sense to them. So most of the time, if the family, you know, if you have a family of 5 and there is only the resources to send one person to school, it's most likely going to be the boy. And most likely maybe the first son. The first boy is going to go to school. The girl, the first child, maybe what they would do to that one is, especially if she's beautiful, she'll be given off to marriage. You know, they just believe that, you know, you have instances of girls being sent into child labor to raise money to send boys to school. And the girl never has the opportunity, you know, to have a self-esteem, because most times education also builds our self-esteem. It's an opportunity for us. So you find the girl consistently deteriorating, while the boy, you know, is the one that is celebrated.
All right. Now, to what extent will literacy level contribute to development on the African continent?
I said earlier that literacy is like the foundation upon which it's actually the foundation upon which development is going to be built. Because a practical example again, you are introducing ATM machines and the larger percentage of the population cannot even read and write. How are they going to operate ATM machines? I've found myself several times standing by an ATM machine on, you know, a line, and I can see somebody that wants to use the ATM machine having to call me or ask somebody to please come and help them operate it. You, even when you're even looking at the lower cadre staff or even drivers, cleaners, you spend your money getting, you know, very expensive household gadgets, and your housemaid, your cleaner, can't even operate it. Your driver, you are spending your money getting expensive vehicles, and you don't even have a motor vehicle officer that can operate it. He doesn't even understand the dashboard. So how many people do we have on the streets driving vehicles that understand ordinary traffic rules? They can't even read what is written there.
All right, we don't have all the time, but from your projection and from the experience and from all the works and your assessment, is there hope for Africa?
There is hope for Africa.
Okay.
I would use Lagos State as a point, as a case study. When we have the right leaders, like we have the present governor, I was privileged to be at a breakfast meeting with the governor and on education, and I can see the extent of work that is being done to restructure the education sector. And I think this is the beginning. As we identify the gaps and the leadership can take responsibility to create solutions, I think we're ready for change. It's
all right. Ayaebene Olubukola, thank you very much for coming on Africa Today.
Welcome.
And we thank Nancy Josie Chiakunda for joining us from the UK earlier on. Now, according to a UN report, every extra year of education raises a person's income potential by at least 10%. So with education as a tool for sustainable development, many say there should be no place for closed books and empty classrooms in Africa. An investment in improving literacy will do the continent a lot more good than any form of economic bailout or aid. And that's our show for today. And as always, we invite you to share your thought with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today, or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. I am Mike Okwoche. Remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.